Good evening and welcome to our mostly weekly meeting, the New York Times Preservation Society. Today we have an amazing show lined up with famed New York Post baseball columnist Ken Davidoff. I'll be speaking about that in a moment. Just want to go over a couple of things. First of all, tonight, Ken is going to talk about his selections and stuff. If you don't agree, I know you will use, nice words, stuff like that. I know you may not agree, you may totally agree, but everybody in here should act appropriately. Next few weeks, no meeting next week. February 10th, we got Dan Vandermortel, who's going to be talking about the Giants, the shooting of that occurred at the Polo Grounds. The week after that, we got Joe Conte, who did a whole book and then a revised book on the rivalry between the Giants and the Dodgers, first in Brooklyn and New York, and then in San Francisco and Los Angeles. After that, we got Norm Coleman on November 24th. For those who don't know, Norm has every autograph of every San Francisco Giant that ever played in a game since 1958. And he's going to give us a story about how he went about doing that. So that should be great. March 3rd, we got Jim Kaplan. Jim wrote this fantastic book about the greatest game ever pitched, Juan Marichal and Warren Spahn. I know it's a New York organization. That being said, Marichal was signed by the Giants right after they announced that they'd be leaving San Francisco. And most of you in here still root for the Giants, so it's a natural thing.
I don't.
I know you don't, Frank. You make that abundantly clear every week. And we have Johnny Antonelli, a baseball memoir by Scott Toniak. Scott is a very famous sportscaster up in Rochester and has won numerous awards. So again, tonight we have Ken Davidoff. Ken has been writing for the Post, and before that, he wrote in New Jersey and for Newsday. He is a wonderful writer. He came to my school on occasions, met my students, talked to them, met them at Citi Field, came and gave us greetings at Cooperstown when Steve and I were up there. Attended the Giants trophy tour with his beloved father and his son in 2012, which would be 2013. Known him for a really long time. Funny story is when I first met him, he thought I was 80. And that was like 15 years ago. So I'd be like 95 now, because I don't think he could understand why kind of a young guy at the time would lead a group of mostly older gentlemen. I learned a lot from corresponding with Ken. One of them was you guys don't know, it's called the Davidoff rule. Basically, you are not allowed to complain about any Giant problems 10 years after each World Series. So according to that, we have either 30 years after this or 10 years after the 2014, which would be 2024. And I think Ken would agree that I've been pretty good on that. In our correspondence, I barely complained about. So just a couple other things. Ken put out his list that I sent out to everybody of 10 players that he would that he selected for a Hall of Fame enshrinement. One got in, the rest didn't. So Ken is going to talk about his process, why he picked the guys he did. And then we'll, he'll talk about Ortiz also, the one guy that he did pick who got in. And then we will, in order, ask any questions. I don't think Ken would mind answering questions about the lockout as well. But it is a pleasure. Ken, you're an amazing guy. We can't thank you enough for showing up. We know how busy you are. And please welcome Ken Davidoff. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gary, for that rousing introduction. Gary is really one of my favorite people I've ever met doing this job. It's just such a pleasure again to interact with him, and he's right. You really have towed the line with the Davidoff rule, and you know, if the Giants don't win again, you only have another 19 seasons until, you know, you can start complaining again. So through the 2040 season, 2010 plus 10, and then the additional 10 for 12 and 14. So you're on a good path, Gary. I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you.
So, you know, we can make this as freewheeling as you want. You know, I just called up my column myself. My first year of voting for the Hall of Fame was 2007. So this was my 16th year voting, and you get a vote after you've been in the Baseball Writers Association of America for 10 years. So I guess I've been a member of the BBWAA. I guess this will be my 26th year coming up. I take this Hall of Fame stuff really seriously. I've thought long and hard about this. I know many people do not agree with my outlook, including many of my fellow writers. And I'm happy to have spirited debate tonight about that, however you want to do it. And I'm also happy to discuss any other baseball questions or issues you have. I did cover, there were 2 bargaining sessions this week that I covered, so I'm pretty up to speed on what's going on with the lockout. So just to start with the Hall of Fame stuff, I just have my ballot. You know, I'll just say my ballot, and I'll say my general philosophy about it. So I went Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Todd Helton, Andrew Jones, David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, Scott Rowland, Curt Schilling, Sammy Sosa. So my feelings have evolved over time. When I first started voting, like I did not vote for Mark McGwire because of the steroids allegations that he later confirmed. And then even after I bent on him, I still didn't vote for Rafael Palmeiro because he failed a test. And then I bent on him too. And the reason I bent, because I feel like I need to follow the direction set by the Hall of Fame itself. And it's pretty clear that the Hall of Fame uses selective morality. You know, when you talk about who's already in there, when you talk about Cap Anson, who, you know, goes back before any of us, I think. I mean, the guy was personally involved in segregating the game, you know, and in keeping players of color out, which is pretty horrific, not just on a human scale, but on a baseball scale, how that damaged the sport. So, and then you talk about guys who gambled, you know, back in the early part of the 20th century. There's no doubt there are guys in the Hall of Fame who were involved in gambling, who got in anyway. And then you talk about amphetamines, and we can get in amphetamines versus steroids later if you want, as we advance. And then what really just broke the camel's back for me was Bud Selig, who I happen to personally like Bud. I got along with him great when he was commissioner. But I'm sure you all remember collusion in the late 1980s. Bud was the Brewers owner. It was like, oh, why isn't Tim Raines on a team? Oh, because the owners all colluded to destroy free agency. So yeah, he's not playing, which was just so offensive to me. And I think, and I'll happy to elaborate on this later, I think that damages the game far more than guys trying to, you know, breaking the rules to help their team win. So that's how I got to where I got with this ballot. And I guess I'll just open it up, Gary, unless you want me to, you know, delve any further.
If you have questions, hit that raise your hand button. I'm going to start it off. Ken, I have one comment and one question.
Okay.
Comment is, you know, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio, and I hear a lot of these talking heads saying that the writers should not have a vote, which I laugh at. You guys have been voting for close to 100 years since the first thing. What is your opinion on people saying that?
Oh, I have absolutely no problem with that, Gary. You know, we got plenty of time here, so we'll do some deep dives, right? We'll get into some rabbit holes. So like the MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, those are our awards, my organization's awards. We created those awards. We own those awards. We give out those awards. Hall of Fame is entirely different. Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame outsources my organization to vote. You know, and as you all know, it's one of 2 avenues they use to elect Hall of Famers, right? The other one is the era committees. So if they feel if the Hall of Fame ever feels like the writers are not producing the way they want us to produce, they can fire us tomorrow. There's no written agreement. There's no contract. We serve at the pleasure of the Hall of Fame. And believe me, there are times when I get frustrated with my own voting body, including this very election, especially just with some of the guys who didn't get in. So I, in many cases, I might agree with them if they catch me on the right day.
And my other comment, you had one admission, and I feel this guy, and I know I'm a Giant fan, but he really doesn't get a sniff. And I was really going over the statistics, and Jeff Kent had 6 straight years of 100 RBIs. Then he had 93, then 2 more of 100. All-time leader at second base in home runs, close to 2,500 hits, close to 400 home runs, 1,500 RBIs. I know he didn't get along with everybody, and I watched mostly every game he ever played.
It may make a noise. I don't know.
Hold on. I watched just about every game that Giants played, and I know he wasn't the greatest defensive player, but he rarely cost them. Why is he admitted? Why didn't you vote for him? If you could just, give us your thoughts.
Sure. So he's an interesting case. And I think honestly, what has victimized Jeff Kent the most is his timing. So I'm looking now, this was his 9th ballot. So that means he retired after the 2008 season. So I think the reason he hasn't done better is because of ballot gridlock. Because you're only allowed to put 10 on the ballot. And for someone like me who put Bonds and Clemens and Schilling on there every year, I just ran out of room for him. So in a vacuum, do I think Jeff Kent belongs in the Hall of Fame? I do. But I vote for 10 every year, and he is not ranked among my top 10. Now, I'll obviously study next year when we get to next year, but just common sense. So 5 guys on my ballot are off now. Ortiz got in, and then Bonds, Clemens, Schilling, and Sosa all fell off. So I'm going to have some major room next year. And there's only one really interesting guy coming on. That's Carlos Beltran. So I think Jeff Kent will actually get a nice jump next year. It's going to be awfully hard for him to get the 43% he needs to go from 32.7 to 75. The bottom line is I think, Gary, I know you're not 95 years old. You're a younger man than that. So, but it's, I think Jeff Kent will get into the Hall of Fame in our lifetime. Very likely through the ERA committee.
All right. The rest of the evening will be you guys cannot thank you enough. Let's go to John McLaughlin. John?
Ken, thank you for doing this and jumping on with us. Basically, 2 questions. One is Hall of Fame related, and one is sort of a stadium update issue, if you have it. Number one, with the Hall of Fame, do you find it hypocritical that some of the other writers, they voted for Ortiz but did not vote for Bonds or Clemens?
I think that's very fair, John. I fail to see the logic there. I guess you could say he was usually saying yes on Ortiz and no on those guys.
No, I'm saying overall yes on all of them, but I think it's hypocritical that they don't vote for Bonds and Clemens when they never failed the test, but Ortiz did, and they vote for him.
Yeah, I want to, again, what are we going to by 8:30, Gary?
We're going to whenever you've had enough.
Until we're exhausted. So I like deep dives. I like going into rabbit holes, and I know you all can handle it. You're all passionate baseball fans. You know the history well. So that 2003 survey test, the idea that anyone used that to penalize a Hall of Fame candidate, I think is bullshit. If Gary, I hope that's okay. It really bothers me intellectually. Like that test was designed for, to see, all right, do we need steroid testing? Like, all right, if enough of you idiots fail this test, then we're going to test for steroids. And enough of the idiots did fail the test. Those tests were supposed to be, it was never supposed to be, it was supposed to be like, again, maybe I'll work a little blue here if that's okay, Gary. Like if I pee in a cup and like the minute it goes to the lab, that's it. Like there's no Ken Davidoff label on that cup. And the idea that Ortiz's privacy rights were violated. And I find that far more offensive than the fact that he was very likely using something he shouldn't have been using. So, to get back to your original question, yes, I think it's very hypocritical.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is about the stadium situations. What do you see happening with Tampa Bay and Oakland?
That's a really good question. I don't see how it's going to work with the Rays, and really the clock is now ticking. That lease expires after 2027. I think they're going to move to Montreal. I think they'll become a Montreal team. Oakland is a little more complicated. They're trying really hard out there to put something together. They've struck out, and now, excuse me, now that the commissioner has officially green lighted them to look into other markets. You know, the other markets that are obvious are Vegas and then Nashville. I'm not giving up completely on Oakland, but you know, it would not surprise me if 5 years from now they were the Las Vegas A's.
Thank you, John. Jeff Cohen, you're up.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, David, for doing this. One of my pet peeves, I would say, is with that the Clemens and Bonds thing is they were Hall of Famers before using the steroids, and that's really one of my pet peeves. What do you think about that?
I know a lot of people use that argument, and I guess I've just never really given it much thought because I vote yes already. You know, acknowledging that they almost certainly were using steroids. So I just haven't really given it a great amount of thought.
And a thought on if I can ask about the lockout, any gut feeling when it's going to end? If they come to agreement, you think it's going to be a spring training or a truncated one?
Yeah, I certainly do not think spring training will start on time. I think there will be delayed. It was funny, the other day I was talking with the Associated Press reporter, Ron Blum, who actually would be a fascinating guest here. He's really an expert in the labor stuff. He's been covering all, you know, since the 80s, the labor stuff. And this is actually the first labor dispute I've covered. You know, I've been covering since 95, right after the last one was resolved. So I turned to Ron and I said, all right, tell me when the season is going to start. He said April 15th. You know, so let's say spring training starts March 15th and the season starts April 15th, and maybe it's 150, 155 games or something like that, or maybe they figure out a way to get all 162 in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mars, you're up.
Okay, thank you for joining us, by the way. I'd like to ask you, would you vote for a person that's considered for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that never sang or played an instrument?
Well, yeah, they wrote the songs, right?
What if they didn't write the songs either?
What did they do?
They did nothing, but they used electronic equipment to make a record, and they were considered for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Would this be like Milli Vanilli?
Well, whoever.
He's making an anti-DH rant.
I know.
That's what it is.
I couldn't figure out where you were going with that.
Well, where I'm going is this, you know, when you have, in the case of Bonds and Clemens, I'm going to go back to 1904 and 1905. In 1904, the New York Giants were 106 and 47 with 5 ties. In 1905, they were 105 and 48 with 2 ties. They played over 154 games, but the players' stats counted. So if somebody broke any sort of record, whether it was hits, batting average, or whatever, home runs, then let's say they hit 61 and Babe Ruth hit 60 and Roger Maris had the asterisk. The player stats counted with the extra tie games because of rain or darkness. So the question is, when you're coming to all those, and you're coming to players like Bonds and Clemens, you know, where is the validity for what they did and never admitted it? Had they admitted it years ago, they probably would have been voted in by now. What's your opinion?
You know, Mars, yeah, I was struggling with you for a while there, so I'll just address the last point. I think you might be right. I think if they, acknowledged their wrongdoing long ago and accounted for it. I think that's a fair statement. I'm a little nuts. I think all the law enforcement stuff, I think that's a game, just like the game itself. Like I tip my cap to Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds for fighting the law as hard as they did, and they both won. You know, Barry got convicted on the one count, and then an appeals court overturned it. Roger, you know, put his butt on the line when, like, you know, when my rival Mike Lupica, I remember in 2006. Okay, Roger, if you really say you didn't use steroids, and, you know, swear in front of Congress and did it and say it, and he did, and he got away with it. Like, for me, you know, I view it as a competition, just like the games themselves. So he gets extra points from me. But I am definitely in the minority when it comes to that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mars. Before we get to Harvey, George Greger, go ahead. Take the mute off. There you go, George.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for joining us tonight. This has always been a fun group, and we've had some great guests, and we enjoy you in print if we don't always see you in person. Just getting back to Jeff Kent, I have one word about Jeff Kent. It's Bill Mazeroski. Now, they each played 17 seasons. They played other positions, but at second baseman, 260 versus 290. And you know who got the 290. 1,500 plus RBIs against 853 for Mazeroski. And the lifetime fielding average at second base, 983 versus Jeff Kent's 980. I'm going to stop right there, but why do I need to say any more? Playing in the shadow of Bonds or Clemente, right?
Yeah, so that you raise one interesting point, George, or a few, but I'll address one. You know, Bill Mazeroski getting in. Now, again, for all the complaints about the writers, which again I have zero problem with, we did not elect Bill Mazeroski. That was the Veterans Committee, and if we probably did like 5 seconds of Googling, in my memory, I'm pretty sure like one of his allies was on the 16-person committee, and, you know, just pounded his fist on the table and said, you know, Bill Mazeroski was a Hall of Famer, gosh darn it, and he got in. Yeah, I would never ever insult any of you by saying that Bill Mazeroski was a superior player to Jeff Kent. I don't believe he was, and ultimately that should help Jeff Kent, just like I feel like the induction of Trevor Hoffman is helping Billy Wagner stay afloat.
And the fielding average at second base, 980 versus 983, virtually even.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we look at different metrics when it comes to defense. I'm sorry, go ahead, George.
Mazeroski had 2,000 more chances. If that means something, but he would. So anyway.
Thank you, George. Harvey, you're up.
And
Put me
thanks
online.
What?
Put me online. I just want to get online.
I will. I'll record you, Frank and Steve. Also, some
Frank,
of you guys do not know how to use the hand raised. I got you down. Okay, Harvey, you're up.
Okay, Ken, thanks for being here. Mars, thanks for being here. And
Good to see you.
George, your analysis of why Ken should be in the Hall of Fame is impeccable. Ken, I have a question, and then I want to expand on it. Here's the question that's going to come after somewhat a lengthy discussion. You hear a lot about that Barry Bonds cheated. Now, let's start off with, I agree Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. I agree with you. I'm biased towards Barry Bonds. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think there should be a question. But I hear the question, or I hear this statement that Barry cheated. I had a discussion with it a number of years ago in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, inside the old Yankee Stadium, with a dear friend of mine, a Yankees fan, and they were pounding at me. That's how long ago this was. Barry cheated. I said, the players on the field knew Barry was taking steroids or PEDs or juicing. They knew it. Joe Torre once walked him, I think intentionally 4 times in an interleague game in the early 2000s. The Black Sox, they cheated in 1990. Barry was trying to win. So my friend says to me, I said to him, and I don't want to give his name out, but he happened to have been at that time a justice of the New York Supreme Court. He's now retired. He's still my friend. And I said, what in your opinion did he cheat at? He said he cheated at the sacred numbers. I said, what are the sacred numbers? 60, 61, 56, 714. Barry hadn't passed Henry at that point in the total. I said to him, I said, the numbers? I said, how many home runs did Josh Gibson hit? And he looked at me like I was crazy. Now, he knows I'm crazy, but I'm not insane. But I said, how many home runs did Josh Gibson hit? Of course, Josh might have hit 800. He might have hit 900. We don't know. And if he played in the major leagues, he would have hit 800. Who was cheated? I'll tell you who was cheated. Josh Gibson was cheated, and we fans were cheated. Barry Bonds didn't cheat. I don't know what the definition of cheat is, but if cheat is that he cheated the so-called sacred numbers, that's nonsense. I finished with my friend by saying the Yankees had this big placard up about how many World Series they won. So I said, and he's a Yankees fan, his back was to me, and I said, here's a number that's probably more important than all the other numbers. And I said 28. And he had no clue. He had no clue what I was saying. I said, the Yankees won 28 World Series. Now, at that time, our Giants had only won 5. We have now won 8. So we got a ways to catch up to the Yankees. But my question to you is, how did Barry cheat?
Harvey, if this isn't too forward, will you marry me? I mean,
That's a first on this side.
Hey, listen, we got a crazy group. You know, anything is possible in this group.
I mean, you just beautifully expressed my opinion on this whole matter. It's funny. I was watching the network. Tuesday was the day of the announcement, and the great Tom Verducci, who I'm friendly with Tom. I respect the world out of Tom.
I love Tom Verducci, but I disagree with him on this. But I love him.
Yeah. So Tom, he'll be in the Hall of Fame someday. In the writers' wing. So
will you.
I won't. Thank you. But Tom always makes the point. It's the competition, and my response to Tom is, it's not the competition. It's the commerce, because the whole foundation of competitive sports is that everyone's trying to win, right? Otherwise, it's pro wrestling. It's a play. It's a movie. So if everyone's trying to win, then what Barry Bonds did was a misdemeanor, not a felony. Whereas what the segregationists did was absolutely a felony, because they were not doing everything they could to help their teams win.
Thank you.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go with Terry, then Dan, then Howell, Frank, Steve, and George, and then anybody else who wants to sign on. Terry,
How about
floor is
me?
yours.
Hello.
What's up, Mo?
Just want to make sure I'm on, that's all.
Well, go
Always
ahead.
on, Mo. Don't
Mo,
worry.
go ahead. I gotta turn my phone off. Go ahead, Mo.
No, he's just wanted to make sure he's on. Terry, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, my phone is ringing and I can't get to it right now. It'll stop in just a minute. Ken, I just have to tell you, I may not agree with all of your choices, but I admire your ethics in making them. I really do. It's very encouraging to see that in somebody that has the power to vote. So thank you for that. Now, speaking personally, because spring training has a definite impact on my bank account, why do you believe that it's going to start on March 15th? Is there some scuttlebutt you've heard that leads you to believe that negotiations are showing signs of promise, or can you speak to that, or reveal whatever it is that you are privy to that we are not?
Yeah, first of all, Perry, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank
or
you.
your little shot
Yeah,
there.
you know, I apologize. I've been umpiring 2 games a day for the last 4 days, and I'm just beat to shit. And I got nailed by a ball today, and my left arm is totally useless. So,
Oh my goodness.
so yeah, so that's a first 2, Gary. He proposed to a guy, and I'm sitting in the bathtub on the Zoom. So.
Well, can we see that?
Oh boy.
You missed it. I when I saw what it looked like on the Zoom, I put on my my image there.
So Perry, regarding the lockout, you know, I was curious what Ron, you must know Ron, right? Ron Blum?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Ron's been covering baseball forever. I think Ron is
Well,
60.
I know of him.
He's about 60. He's been covering baseball since he was about 2. I think the world of him on this stuff. I was curious that his take was March 15th. And I think that's generally going to be what it is, because they're already moving in the right direction. This week, the biggest step was that the players were trying to shorten the free agency clock from 6 years to 5, 6 years of service to 5. They gave up the ghost on that one.
Yeah.
And then the second biggest step was the players came up with the idea of, let's give our younger guys more money. Let's say, trying to think of some Giants examples, but no one's coming to mind. Have there been any recent Giants rookies of the year? I can't even think of any. But
Yastrzemski.
he didn't win Rookie of the Year, did he?
No, Buster Posey.
No, he's
Buster.
new.
All right. So when Buster won Rookie of the Year, he whatever the minimum salary was at that point, 300. So now Buster would get like $1 million bonus, which is nice. That's meaningful money. So the owner signed off on that idea. So they are clearly, even though the individuals involved really hate each other's guts. It's really some personality issues there. Despite that, none of them want to go, run hardware stores for a living. So they all realize we have to come to an agreement sooner or later. So they are clearly, I've been using football analogies. They're still on their own side of the field. They haven't crossed the 50 yet. But let's say they're at the 15 to 20 yard line. So I would say they picked up a good 10 yards this week.
Okay, good. That's encouraging. Thank you.
The man with the golden voice, Mr. Dan Taylor. The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Gary. Ken, thanks for doing this, and I enjoy your work very much. Two-part question. You touched at the beginning about the Hall of Fame and the character issue. How much do they push the character issue to you guys before voting? And the second part of that on the character issue, I mean, I read Bill Madden's piece yesterday about David Ortiz and some of the shady dealings aside from PEDs. Is that stuff that MLB is able to, off the record, provide voters with insight about?
First of all, Dan, you do have an incredible voice. Second of all, thank you for the kind words. I did not read Bill's piece, so I'm not sure exactly what. Obviously, Ortiz was shot in a case of mistaken identity, which
Well, that's not what I hear from
it would
MLB
be like
executives, but
like Trump getting shot here, mistaken identity, right? It just seems very unlikely. The only time the Hall of Fame has really put its finger on the scale in my 15 years of voting was the year that they sent out a letter to everyone on the voting list, and all of a sudden I had an email in my inbox from Joe Morgan, may he rest in peace, with really what I thought was a disgusting letter. Essentially, we don't want these guys in. And then William McCovey, God bless him, may he rest in peace. He went to one of the Chronicle writers. I think it was John Shea. Like you've had him as a guest, right, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, he's great guy. I think it was John Shea, and Willie said, no, actually, I'd be fine with Barry getting in and these other guys getting in. So that was pretty offensive what they did with that. And I know some people, I know Jeff Passan of ESPN, like he quit voting right then and there. He was so offended by that act, and I didn't blame him. I was offended too. So that was the only time they've ever done anything like that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Howell, you're up.
All right, great, thanks. Hey, Ken. First question, off the record, well, not off the record, off topic a little bit. You know Barry Bloom?
I know, yeah. I was just texting with Barry Bloom yesterday.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine from way back. We grew up in the Bronx together. Years, long
Well, you
time
look
ago.
much better than he does. You're the same age?
No, he's a couple years older.
Okay.
I'm 63, actually.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Barry looks like he's about 83.
Yeah. Oh, that San Diego lifestyle, it ages a man. But back on topic, couple of things. Albert Bell. I mean, seriously, is it just because of his, fighting with the writers and not talking to anybody? Is that because, I mean, his numbers are, he was so dominant for such, for such a long time. How could he not be in?
It's a fair question. I'm calling up Albert now because I'm trying to remember if he was even on the ballot when I started voting. Let's see. Albert Bell. He was only on 2 ballots. Goodness gracious.
Really?
Okay. On the very first ballot, my very first ballot was his last ballot when he got 3.5%. And as you know, you need 5% to stay on the ballot. Yeah, I know I'm pretty confident I did not vote for him. And I think back then I definitely was not doing all 10 at that point, so that's not my excuse. I do think he was a defensive liability, and even like if you look at I'm looking at his numbers now. I mean, if you look at the analytic metrics as opposed to home runs, RBIs, like he had 4 elite years, 93 through 96, and then they did start to fall off. Although that negative defense is part of that. So I don't have a great answer for you, but there's no doubt that the behavioral issues were part of it.
Yeah. And then I don't know if I got on a little bit late. Have you talked about Pete Rose at all?
I have not spoken about Pete, and it's funny. For many, many years, I thought that Pete did not deserve to get in. Going back to the point made my fiance Harvey, that the idea that like how much more damage did Pete Rose do with what he did as opposed to the steroid guys? Pete Rose, I've read the Dowd report, and I've written about it. Pete in 88, I think it was 1980, he was managing the Reds. He had a 5-man rotation. So he was betting on the Reds 3 of every 5 days. He did not bet on the days they started Mario Soto and Bill Gullickson because he didn't like those 2 guys. He didn't have faith in those 2 guys. Think about the message Pete Rose was sending to the gambling community, who were in the loop on what was going on. The days he did not start those 2 guys. Did he rest his better players those days? Save them up for the days he was betting. He did not use his better relievers those days. I mean, that calls into question so many things. What we're talking about the idea of you play sports to try to win. Now, when Bud got in, for the collusion stuff, so I don't know, screw it. If you're going to let Bud in, I think you should let Pete in too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bud Selig, the whole thing was a joke. I mean, he was an owner and became the commissioner. I mean, he's not the owner anymore. His daughter's the owner. Please. It's ridiculous. But I agree about Rose as well. I mean, he was, first of all, he's not, he's on the ineligible list, so it's sort of a moot point until he's reinstated, which I don't know. He probably won't be until he's dead. But my kind of last thing and sort of overall question is, talking about Selig, Cap Anson, all the scoundrels, Ty Cobb that have been in, obviously, with his, baseball prowess, he deserved it, and not having the Negro League players and all that stuff. Doesn't it sort of call into question just the validity of the Hall of Fame in general? Like who's in, who's out? It's so subjective, and the same reasoning to not have Schilling in, even though I find him despicable. Ty Cobb was just as despicable 100 years ago. So it's like, it's almost like, what's the point at this point? The whole thing is, it's absurd. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't disagree, Howie. It's fine. I get, God bless the readers of the New York Post. They're a opinionated bunch, and I get a bunch of emails. And I was actually just catching up today on emails. I mean, it's so many, so many of them, just cursing me out, because I wrote the ballot column, which Gary sent to you all. And then when the results came Tuesday, I wrote a column saying I thought it was an atrocity that Bonds and Clemens did not get in. And oh my God, the hate mail I got. And all these people like, you want to ruin the Hall of Fame. And I always write back, it was never not ruined. You know, you lied to yourself when you were a kid. It was never special. It's a museum. And that is truly the way I feel about it.
Thank you, Howell. Frank Lewis.
I want to point out, considering the commentary on those tie games, there's another side of the coin. When a game rains out, before it's official, the records are wiped out. I think the great home run hitters all lost a few because games are rained out before the 5th inning. And I want to ask Ken this. A long time ago, I don't know what kind of Phil Cavaretta, I don't think he ever made it, and he was great. He played 22 years with something like a 280, a 290 average. Do you have any information on that?
Absolutely none. I'm sorry.
He played in the 40s and 50s with the Chicago Cubs, and then he played for and managed the White Sox.
I think he was Gary's favorite player when Gary was growing up, right?
Hey, can I get my 2 cents in? Maybe
No,
Mo,
you
three.
gotta
Mo, I got you
This is
written
not-
down. Not your turn yet. Steve, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a Zoom session yesterday, Ken, with close friend of yours, Marty Appel. And it was a nice session. And I also had one with Mark Berman, one of your colleagues, about a month ago. I live in Arizona now and certainly missed the New York Post. What a wonderful paper that was. I mean, you can still get it online, but it's not the same as reading it. The question I have for you is not my question. It's coming from somebody that doesn't have a microphone. How can you vote for the steroid users over Jeff Kent, a great clutch hitter who never used? End quote.
Yeah, I think I've answered that in terms of why I vote for the steroid guys. And I would also just kind of throw it out there. How do we know that Jeff Kent didn't use steroids? We don't know. You know, I just
He's a
don't know
Mormon. He didn't.
don't know about anybody, which to me is why it's just so silly to try to, play, boy detective and try to figure out who did what, when, and where. If you want to draw someone, I feel like I'm hearing my own voice reverb. If you want to draw a line at the A-Rods and the Manny Ramirez's who got suspended, players all agreed. Now this matters. Now we're keeping track. And then they get caught. I fully understand that. But to start doing this, Barry's dealer got caught. That's what happened, right? Yeah. Barry's dealer got caught. And that's why Barry is not in the Hall of Fame. And I think that's a shame.
I agree.
All right, we're going to go George and then Mo. George, you're up. Okay, unmute yourself.
Back in the day, 1994, when there was that big strike, the steroid era pretty much started right after that. And I think the owners are really to blame for the whole thing. They really could have stopped this in the bud, but they were getting people in the seats and they were very happy. And it became a business, and boy, they just let it go. And I got to give Bonds and the other and Clemens a pass in some way because they were allowed to do it. If they weren't allowed to do it, they should have been playing baseball. You can't have it both ways. And I think that's the biggest sin. And I noticed that also that Gil Hodges has made it now this year. Going back, there was so much politics that we were not getting in back in the 70s, the 60s and 70s when he retired. Ted Williams had a lot to do with it. So that organization getting into the Hall of Fame is so political. And I wonder in the future, in the next 15 or 20 years, when Bonds and all these other guys and Clemens get to the Veterans Committee, will they get in then? Maybe they should only get in when they're dead, so they'll never have the feeling that they ever made the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, Hodges deserved it 30 years ago. What's your opinion?
A few different thoughts in there, George. So I'll just kind of tie it all in a knot and say there's no doubt the Hall of Fame is extremely political, and I always has been, I think, and unfortunately always will be. And when you talk about what happened with Bonds and Clemens, I'm sure you all follow closely enough. When their clocks started on the writer's ballot, it was 15-year maximum. And then midway, I think it was 2014 or 2015, the Hall of Fame shortened it to 10. I think they did that in the hopes of kind of clearing up the gridlock, and also with the knowledge that the current Hall of Famers don't want those guys in. And I think that's terrible. Someone mentioned Bill Madden earlier. I get along with Bill. I don't see Bill anymore because he's kind of more than half retired. But Bill always had the line like, I don't want to put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame because I don't want to offend Hank Aaron. And like, God bless Hank Aaron. I love the guy. He deserves all the love he got alive and now gone. But why would I care what Hank Aaron thinks about who I'm voting for? I'm doing the Hall of Fame at the end of the day is funded by fans. It's funded by people who pay their tickets to walk into that museum and who donate money to keep the thing going and who attend ball games and so on and so forth.
Thank you, George. We have a lot of people with their hands up. And to be fair to everybody, if you have asked a question, I will get to you, but I want to get the people who have not asked anything first. And I think most of you would be in agreement with that. Mo Resner, floor is yours.
Hi, just a couple of quick notes. Kurt Schilling is definitely a Hall of Famer, but he was denied entrance because of his political views, etc. I'll go along with that on one condition. You throw out Ty Cobb and one or two others who definitely broke moral rules. So that's my feeling about Kurt Schilling. Just want to throw in something. When I was a minor league coach with the Expos, I had the great privilege of joining Bill Mazeroski, shagging flies in the outfield because Oscar Gamble needed batting practice. So I found him to be a good guy, and every time I hear Bill Mazeroski, I love what he is. Basically, that's it, except that Major League Baseball itself still considers itself by law, and it's true, a labor organization. If they were no longer considered labor, there would never be a strike. Because what they're fighting for has nothing to do with working conditions, has nothing to do with minimum wages. It's just something that they're going to have to recognize sooner or later that they do not run the ball club. And so far, they're running baseball, a lot of which I agree with, but a lot I don't. Anyway, Ken, nice talking to you again. See you soon. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mo.
All right, Mo Resner, ladies and gentlemen.
Mo will be at the Concord when they reopen. Charles, you're up.
Yeah, I kind of missed who was getting married, but I'm guessing that Gary's officiating. Since it's his group. What was I going to ask? I was going to ask what do you think of the senior committee, and what were your thoughts on Harold Baines getting into the Hall?
Yeah, so funny story. So that was, I think it was 2018. And I know, it was Lee Smith. So everyone knew Lee Smith was going to get in. He was a guy who I think he was generally around the 50% range for the writers, but he was just the kind of guy you just knew he was going to get in quickly by his peers, which I can't stress enough. I'm fine with all of it. But I remember I was talking with a Chicago writer named Mark Gonzalez, and I said, "What do you think? Lee Smith and who else?" I was, as a New York guy, I was looking at George Steinbrenner, who was on that ballot, and there were a lot of pro-George people on the committee, including Tory, Robbie Alomar loves George. I thought Jerry Reinsdorf liked George. Not sure that actually happened. And Paul Beeston, from the Blue Jays.
Right.
George loves those guys. Love those. So I thought, I was just handicapping with Mark Gonzalez, and Mark Gonzalez smiled. He said, Harold Baines. I said, Harold Baines? What are you talking about, Harold Baines? He said, Reinsdorf and La Russa are going to get Harold Baines in. And I said, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. And lo and behold, hours later, Harold Baines.
I thought he was a good player for a long time, but never a great player.
Yeah.
I do think he would have gotten 3,000 hits. It's not for the strikes in 81 and 94.
Yeah, again, I'm a big Hall person. I really have no issue with. Yeah, it
I've
bothered me
been there
far more.
once. I saw McCovey get inducted.
Okay,
That
it
was
bothers
fun.
me far more when people don't get in when they get in. So I wasn't
Right.
outraged by Harold Baines getting in, but yeah, intellectually, yeah, he certainly did
Well,
not
and there are a lot
deserve
of people you'll hear an argument that Don Sutton shouldn't be in there. And he played for so long that he had good stats. And I'm like, no, he was a pitcher. He knew what he was doing and he was good.
Thanks,
So,
Charles.
Yep.
Paul, you're up.
Okay, hi Ken, thank you very much for joining us tonight. My question is, well, one is how many people are on the Baseball Writers Association? How many votes were there total?
This year. I think it was 394.
394. And then the question about the character issue, is that weighted in any way? You said that was added by MLB, by the Hall of Fame, to consider people for the Hall of Fame. Is there a weight to that? In other words, like statistics might be like 50%, or do they just want you to consider it in general as part of a vote you may have?
Yeah, they just wanted to consider it. If you can find it online. There's the rule, the guidelines that they provide. But yeah, there's no weighted formula, and I fully ignore the character stuff because I just feel like it. I feel like we are building a museum here, and we need historical consistency. And
Yeah,
it's
right.
not heaven. It's not heaven. We're not raising kids. We are putting together a museum.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ken.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Dan Levitt, you're up.
Thank you. A couple things. One, speaking of the cheating controversies, it'll be interesting to see how the voters respond to Carlos Beltran next year, and I'm curious what you think. And then just number two, guys like Roland and Helton seem to be done a lot better in the last couple of years than I think people expected. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on those two as well.
Yeah, I think Scott Rowland is the most likely person to get elected next year on the writers' ballot. I think he'll be the top returning vote getter because now Bonds and Clemens will be out. And yeah, he's a guy who's just seen him, has really tracked very positively. Helton's a little behind him, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I would say it's 90% that Scott Rowland gets in at this point, and I'd probably go to 75% for Helton. They're both doing very well.
Thank you.
Jeff Hennig.
Yeah, hi, Ken. Thanks for doing this. It's been very interesting so far. Wanted to know if this is something that you've ever done. I forget how many years you said that you've been voting, but it's been quite a number. One of the Giants beat writers openly admitted after the results came in that he voted for Timmy Lincecum because he knew that he would never get in by the writers, but he wanted to keep him on the ballot so he would get more than the 5%, which ultimately he didn't. He got 2 point something. Is that something that you ever considered doing? Casting a vote for someone just so they can get on there a second year so they can quote unquote be looked at a little bit more in depth?
No, never. And we call that strategic voting. When you're kind of voting, oh, okay, well, Ortiz is going to get in without my vote, so let me vote for this guy, and let me make sure Lincecum gets his 5%. I don't believe in that. I just think you vote for the people you think are the 10 best.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go, Eric. I don't know if that's your name. I'm sorry. First time you're on board. Is it Eric?
Yeah, thanks. That was from a whole different group, and somehow it stuck. And I'm from Long Island originally, but I do live in San Francisco. Steve and Gary, thanks for bringing me to the group. Ken, you were just recommended to me the other day by either Perry or Barry Bloom, so it's kind of ironic. I'll keep the question short. It seems to me that, and I don't follow other sports that carefully, basketball, yes, football, not at all, but the Baseball Hall of Fame seems so much more exclusive than the other halls. I mean, it seems like every year there are just a ton of basketball and football players getting in. Do you have any sense about why that is? I mean, what is it that makes baseball writers so exclusive? And I just want to say that I totally agree. I don't understand why Jeff Kent, if not getting in, I don't understand why his numbers are so incredibly small. And you kind of explained that to some degree, but I mean, he dominated his position for almost a decade. And anyway, my question was about why is the Baseball Hall of Fame so exclusive? Thank you.
Yeah, Eric, and my sympathies for knowing Barry Bloom. And the reason is it's different process. It's just, I don't know the process with the Basketball Hall of Fame, but I know the Football Hall of Fame. The mandate is we are going to elect between 4 and 7 people every year, right? I'm pretty sure that's right. Baseball Hall of Fame, they're perfectly fine with 0. Now, I was concerned because if you remember, we had the writers elected 0 last year. It kind of got covered up because Jeter and Larry Walker got in, they were inducted last September because of the COVID delays. But I was concerned, like if we put up a second 0, that's a bad look for us. But that's the reason why. I mean, I think the most we've ever voted in 1 year is 4. And that was it's been 2 or 3 times. I remember a few years ago. I remember who it was. One that Glavine, Maddox, Pedro, Frank Thomas was in that whole. There was like a 4 or 5 year stretch. We were just putting in a ton of guys, which was good, I thought. So if you think about it, the most we've ever elected is 4, and the least ever elected in football is 4. So more than anything else, it's just a function of the 2 halls process.
I mean, I know that, there's this thing about the Hall of Very Good versus the Hall of Great, but I just sometimes, I just shake my head. I just find it really astonishing that it's so selective.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why the Baseball Hall of Fame arguably is the most popular. I mean, the amount of email I get over the stuff is crazy, and I really don't think it compares in the other sports. There's just so much passion surrounding this, because there are people mad that Ortiz that Ortiz got in, and then there are people mad the other way, that more people didn't get in. So the passion runs both ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Perry, you look lovely, by the way. Ernestine Miller, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ken, hi. Of course, the baseball writers' dinner had to be canceled, but I'd love to hear from you. Are you still president of the New York chapter?
No, I'm not.
Well, you were last year, right? Were you?
No, my run was 2003 and 04, so it's been quite a while. I'm like the Jimmy Carter of, it's been a long time.
Whatever you are, you're a big part of the New York chapter. And I think this group would be so interested in hearing a little more about the wonderful awards dinner. I go every year. It is such a New York event. The New York chapter, also a little more about the New York chapter of the baseball writers. I think that would be something I'd like to know more about, and how it functions, what, in addition to just putting on the spectacular dinner, is there any chance of it being, I know that it was supposed to be now and is it going to be rescheduled? Any chance of that?
So first of all, Ernestine, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a former president of our chapter. I think we say chairman, chapter chairman. And I have continued to be very hands-on involved with our dinner, which now very sadly has been canceled 2 straight years. So it's not going to be, we're just aiming for next January. And we have kind of a big backlog of honorees to recognize. So what our dinner is, for those who don't know, we have the national award winners. So that's MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year. We typically welcome all of them. We fly them all in, put them up in Midtown Hotel. And then we also give out a number of local awards from the New York chapter, which includes Good Guy for the person most cooperative with media, a charity award, community service, New York Player of the Year, an award we call You Gotta Have Heart, which is for someone who's overcome adversity. There's an award we call Toast of the Town, the person who kind of just generates the most buzz. So yeah, our last dinner we had was in January of 2020, and I thought it was one of our best. To give Pete Alonso his NL Rookie of the Year honor, we got Jerry Seinfeld, which was pretty special. The Jerry agreed to come and give that an award, and to give Jacob deGrom his Cy Young award, we got Pedro Martinez. So that's what we like, put on a great show. Fingers crossed, we'll have it next year. So it's January 2021 was canceled due to COVID. Even before this year, we voted on the award. We're planning to have the dinner. I think it was going to be this Sunday, I think. And what happened was you had the lockout, which meant that none of the team officials were going to come. They were going to boycott our dinner because they're a bunch of jerks. And then you had the Omicron, which just made things really messy. And then New York City's vaccine law. Some of the honorees were not vaccinated and not going to get vaccinated. So we just had all this perfect storm. So we had to cancel it, very unfortunately.
Hey, Gary, I got a quick comment. Hello.
Go ahead, Mo.
Okay, I'm the one who has attended 50 consecutive New York baseball writers' affairs. 50 straight years.
You did?
Yes. And I
Congratulations, Mo.
also had a 2-minute speech about 4 years ago.
Nice.
I was there,
Congratulations.
Mel. I heard you, Mel. I was there.
Okay.
But
I'm
anyway,
not sure. I don't know who Karen is, but I think you had your hand up.
Gary,
You
I
gotta
have a
take off.
morality question
Unmute yourself.
here for Ken.
Mars,
So-
you gotta wait, man.
I'm unmuted. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I want to talk about Pete Rose. I don't think there's any question that
By the way, what is your name?
Jerry.
Jerry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't think there's any question that Pete Rose, in terms of what he did on the field, and I'm not even talking about as a manager, as a player, had a Hall of Fame career. I mean, a magnificent career. So my question is, if back when he was caught betting on the Reds, betting on baseball, if he would have shown any contrition, if he would have apologized and said, I did something wrong, and then I'm willing to go do something for charity, whatever, do you think he'd be in the Hall today?
Yeah, if he had done it at the outset, yes. If you remember, he he decided to finally confess. I don't remember, it was the year, I think it was the year Paul Molitor and Eckersley got into the Hall of Fame. So roughly 2004. So 15 years later, he decides, oh, I'm gonna finally own up to this in the form of a book where I can monetize it. And he also he timed it so that I think the book came out the week of the Hall of Fame announcements. So poor Molitor and Eckersley had to answer all these questions about Pete Rose. So the Hall was just livid with him for doing that. So even when he tried to be contrite, he botched it so badly that he stayed on everyone's bad side. And then if you remember a few years ago when Manfred became commissioner, he did say, I'll give Pete an audience. And it went terribly. Pete admitted he was still betting on baseball. God bless Pete. He's his own worst enemy.
Thank you, Jerry. Is there anybody, before we take some more questions, who has not
I have
spoken?
some.
Bill Clink, go ahead. Bill, your mic's not on.
Just saying goodbye. I gotta go talk
Bill,
to
go ahead.
my granddaughter.
All right. We'll
Right.
we'll go around a few more. Ken, I got a quick question. 5 years from now, a lot of us in the group have been debating. I'm not going to hold this to you. Buster Posey.
Yeah, obviously I haven't crunched Buster's numbers. I think Buster has a very strong case when you throw in the 3 World Series rings and just what he meant to the sport and to his team and to the city of San Francisco. If I were a betting man, I would bet on him getting in by the writers.
Thank you. Mars, go ahead. Sorry, Renee, go ahead.
Thank you. Ken, thank you. Great hearing from you. And I agree with a lot of stuff that you have said about the Hall and its history and the hypocrisy and everything. But I have a different question. This is regarding the lockout. Who's the biggest enemy? Is it the players and owners, or is it the players, big market owners, and the small market owners?
Yes, you definitely touched on something vital, Renee, and it's been vital in every labor stoppage, I think, in baseball. And it's because baseball is the one sport without the salary cap, and therefore, not only do you have the real tensions between the players and the owners, but you nailed it, the real tensions between the big market owners and the small market owners. When you talk about the luxury tax threshold, the Yankees would be fine seeing that number going up by $20 to $30 million. The Tampa Bay Rays would not, because then they feel like that would give the Yankees, more of a competitive advantage. And that is something, and Rob Manfred, it's his job to herd all those cats and get all of them on the same page. And I do think that's been part of the problem in terms of why we're very likely to have at the least a delay of spring training.
I mean, what I find so interesting is you had these smaller markets. I'll just say this: the Pirates, the Athletics, Baltimore. But yeah, Tampa, yes, but they managed to find a way to generate revenue. Their teams make the playoffs. They're dangerous. Those other teams, I mean, maybe Oakland has done something, but the other ones have just sat there. First round draft picks, money, and they're not starving. They're not starving, and yet they're able to run their businesses. And I can't believe the other owners don't look at that and just say, wait a minute, you either got to turn this ship around, or we got to turn you guys around, get another ownership, to generate funds to make like what the players want, competitive balance. Well, you know what? As a fan, I'd like to see opposition play that hard. You know what I'm saying? Have those kind of players.
Yeah, and a lot of that, Renee, is tied into tanking, and that is a huge, huge topic being discussed right now in these very labor negotiations. They're trying to come up with ways to discourage teams from tanking, because what they inadvertently did 10 years ago was they came up with these, basically the worst you finished. Not only did you pick higher in the draft, but you got more money to spend in the draft.
That's right.
Jeff Luhnow from the Houston Astros was like, really, is that right? Okay, well then I'm going to put together a team that's 50 and 112 and get not only the highest pick, but the most money to sign those picks with. And that's how they got Correa. That's how they got McCullers. That came into play. Same thing with the Cubs.
That's how they got the trash can.
That's how I got the trash can. The Cubs and Theo Epstein. So that's what they're trying to fix now.
Now, I heard somebody, I can't remember what reporter or broadcaster had said this, but I heard if you want to stop it, give the first round draft pick to the team that makes the wild card, that just barely makes it. Help them out. Then that would discourages the teams that are tanking. Your thoughts?
Well, I've heard it a little differently. I've heard it
okay.
Essentially the best team that misses the playoffs, right? So I think this past year would have been the Blue Jays. Then the Blue Jays finished 91 and 71. It's like, hey, the Blue Jays, they went for it. We all know that. They signed George Springer. They signed a bunch of other guys. They went for it, and they just missed by a game. Remember that exciting last day when there was a possibility of a four-way tie. So yeah, let the Toronto Blue Jays pick first as a reward for that. Now that is a dramatic shift from the way sports have always been designed, right? In all sports, the worst team gets to pick first. And in recent years, they had the lottery because there was the tanking going on. So that is a dramatic shift. We're not going to see that, but I think there will be a lottery for the first time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Ken, how are we with time with you? I don't want to. Are you good?
Yeah, I mean, 8:30, is that enough time?
That sounds great.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go to Ed Freer, then Andy, Dan the Man, and Dale.
How about me?
Mars, we got to give everybody a chance who has not asked the question. I'm sorry.
Accepted.
Thank you.
Ed,
Gary, go ahead.
Okay, Ken, a big fan of the New York Post, buy it every day. In fact, until a moment ago, the wife was reading today's edition in the other room. My question is, as we talk about sanctimonious, how good the players have to be, I'm old enough to remember past scandals. What is any discussion about FanDuel and all that immediate presence coming to baseball? as a concern for future, catastrophes, as I would call it. Is there any scuttlebutt on that?
Oh yeah. I mean, as we are speaking, as we are on Gary Mintz's Zoom, I have no doubt there are players scheming on how to throw games. Now that gambling is legal. I mean, my God, you can set your watch to that scandal. That one's coming. My goodness gracious. Yeah, they Rob Manfred, who was, I actually, at the time, I was okay with him becoming commissioner. I think he gets worse every day on the job. I think he's really become a disaster. I mean, if he could if he could monetize the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he would in a second. I mean, he is just greed. So yeah, when gambling became legalized, he was just like, bring it on. We need a profit off this. And yeah, there will be a scandal. You can set your watch to that one.
What did you think of the extra inning rule? Just quick interjection.
The Ghost Runner?
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah, I got to go home quicker.
Andy Baumgartner, you're up.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned what you mentioned about the legalized gambling and Manfred's part in it. I'm adamant about Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I would say other than Bonds at his best, every guy we've discussed tonight or on your ballot, Pete was better. I mean, other than Mays and Aaron, but that's not the point. I would, Ken, respectfully, and by the way, you're great, you're eloquent, you've made some good points on things more important than Pete Rose making the Hall of Fame or not, though I'm passionate about it. Let's go over at some point all those games that you alluded to. Soto, Gullickson, Pete, I knew him, and I knew Bino Cook, and Bino Cook worked with Pete on NFL Today in the 70s. Pete it's a disease that unfortunately I had. Thank God I don't for the most part. His biggest problem is he'd double up on Monday Night Football. He didn't know how to bet. He didn't have a clue what to do. But there's no evidence of him. I guess I thought Franco was an arsonist, but there's no evidence of him using, say, Franco for 3 innings to win a game / a bet, or him doing anything that really could be questioned. And that's the most important thing. And again, someone on here a few months ago said Gullickson moves the line. Gullickson, DeGrom moves the line if DeGrom doesn't pitch. Bill Gullickson, even Soto would not have moved the line that much. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're more?
No, I'm just saying it seemed like you implied not so much that Pete did some unsavory things as far as the outcome of the game. We know he bet on it, and of course that was foolish, among other things. But there's no evidence of him doing any tampering with the game.
That's fair, Angie. I don't have any evidence.
Okay.
But I will.
Good.
I'm just pointing out the optics are horrendous.
Yes.
Horrendous. For and again, I don't know. I have no idea.
And
how many people in the gambling community knew what was going on.
I'll go one step further.
Yeah.
On a lighter note. Thank you for saying that, because it is bad optics. And I know the way he is. All right, I'll give you one story. Believe it or not, I hate to admit in front of all these people, I was a Dodgers fan because of Sandy Koufax from, say, 63 until 85. And when Lasorda pitched to Jack Clark, my father came home from work and I said, no more. He said, yeah, I've heard that 1,000 times. Well, I'm not. And I'm happy to say, if I root for anyone, it's these Giants, Steve and Gary and all these great guys. So anyway, it's 1976, early in the year. The Reds had won it all the year before. And the Dodgers had won something like 10 in a row, 11 in a row in May. I called Pete in the hotel. It's a rainy day. And I said, what's with you, Pete? He says, oh, I'm just snoozing. So like the arrogant 21-year-old I said, you sure you're not listening in for Dodger scores? And he said, too early in the year. Well, they beat us out by 10 games, the year before by 20. And the Dodgers, as you know, had a pretty good team. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Dan, you're up.
Ken, thanks so much for being here today. And thank you for some of the laughs that you provided too. Very, very interesting. We all need it in these times. And I also really appreciate the fact that you were very upfront about who you voted for. A lot of writers don't do that. So you're willing to just kind of put your name out there and just say what it is. A lot of writers, well, when I say a lot, probably not tons, but there are writers, Scott Oster locally, Howard Bryant nationally, who have had chances to vote and have basically given that away. They're just kind of fed up with it. I wonder if you have ever thought of doing that. And then the general question would be, if you or some other writer does that, is that pretty much a one-way ticket, or could you just be so fed up and then after 5 years, like, you know what, I want back in, I'm going to vote? I mean, you still have the qualifications as a writer for that long length of time. I don't know if you could actually get that back once you give it up. And then just one comment, I think it would be fascinating if you could get Barry Bonds in a room one-on-one now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when he's maybe had even more time to reflect on it, and just ask him one question: was it all worth it? I nominate you to ask that question.
Thank you, thank you. So let me ask you, and I'll do your second part first regarding if you don't vote, do you lose it forever? You do not. You can come back in at any time as long as you're still eligible, and that means you're still covering baseball or you're 10 years or less removed from covering baseball. You lose the ballot once you're, retired and you're 10. I guess the 11th year out would be when you lose the ballot. And now, so have I? No, I have never even remotely considered giving up the ballot. I love it. I think it's so much fun. I think it's good for my business. I've mentioned earlier all the emails I get. My performance is judged by the clicks my stories get online, and my Hall of Fame stories always do great. So it would be rather self-defeating of me to give up that vote.
Would you say that the feedback you received was more positive or more negative based on it?
Oh, I would say it was about 90% negative, 10% positive.
Thanks, Dan. Mr. Lawrence, you're up.
Hi, thanks. Ken, this is great. Thank you very much. I recently retired from baseball, actually, and it was interesting hearing people talk about the gambling. When I was at baseball, I actually had to sign as part of my contract that I would not do fantasy baseball, which I always thought was kind of hypocritical, because meanwhile I was involved in business meetings where we talked about how we could get revenue from the gambling piece. But actually, one time I was on the elevator with one of the big shots in sales, and he said, "Hey, I got Freddie Freeman in the second round. I'm really excited." And I turned around and the commissioner was standing right next to us. But anyway, that was funny. My question for you was actually about the lack of unanimous votes, except for Mariano Rivera. I'm always amazed that some of these baseball greats some of the writers wouldn't vote for like a Willie Mays or any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, clearly, and this goes before my time, there was apparently a very honorable thing to do to just Willie Mays, nope, I don't vote for first year candidates. Apparently that was a thing, right? Like, when I was growing up and I would read, yep, don't vote for first year candidates. Of course, if no one voted for first year candidates, the process wouldn't work. Willie Mays got 0 votes, so he's off the ballot. I think is ridiculous. And I do think has largely, I think clearly that has no longer in play. Once Mariano, even before Mariano, you saw Griffey I think he fell 3 short, and Mariano got unanimous, and then Jeter fell 1 short. And yeah, I think the next slam dunk, I think, is Ichiro. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Ichiro matched Mariano and became unanimous.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dale. All right. One question, Mars, John, and then Ken's wife, Harvey, and then we'll wrap it up. Mars, one quick question, no 3 parts.
Oh, excuse me. Well, regarding the luxury tax, how many teams have actually taken advantage with player development versus the teams that just pocketed the money?
Well, it's a good question, and that's something that the large market teams want to know. They want to see more accounting for that money, and I think you're talking more about revenue sharing than the luxury tax. The revenue sharing is the money that goes to the small market teams, but they want to see more accounting of that money.
Do you know in particular which teams have taken advantage and those who have not?
When you say have taken advantage, Mars, you mean like they didn't spend the money or they did?
Well, you take the Oakland A's as a good example. They seem to shed players all the time. And so they're really not investing in player development. They're shedding their best players, although they're fairly young players.
Well, when you say player development, do you mean like the minor leagues?
Well, when I'm saying player development, how much are they investing in money in player development versus keeping the money?
Yeah, we're kind of talking over player development. The traditional definition of player development is your minor league complex, your instructors, the minor league. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about keeping major league guys, beyond their free agent years?
Well, let me simplify it by saying that there are teams back when Pittsburgh Pirates made the playoffs and played the Giants. They had an owner back then that invested more money in the luxury tax. Since then, they have not. When you compare that with the Oakland A's, they're shedding players. They're not paying them, but they're not taking advantage of player development in terms of money.
I'm sorry. I think you're kind of mixing some terminology around.
Well,
I think may I speak for you? I think you're asking why don't the Oakland A's keep their veteran players? Why do they trade them off?
Okay, I'll go for that.
Yeah, player development. Don't use that term in that context. That's the wrong context.
Okay.
And also luxury tax. That wasn't right. So the bottom line is the small market teams. And the Oakland A's are unique because they play in San Francisco, which you all know is not a small market. It's a big market, but their stadium is a hellhole where they really struggle to draw fans, even when they're good. And they certainly don't have many luxury suites or a lot of the bells and whistles that the Giants have, whatever their ballpark is called today. It probably changes the name again tomorrow. So that's the reason. I mean, you see that with Oakland, with Pittsburgh, with Milwaukee, with Baltimore, with Tampa Bay. They struggled to keep those players, which is why, as Renee mentioned earlier, there's not only players versus owners, there's big market owners versus small market owners.
Why would the A's want to threaten to move to the 40th largest market, which may work in football because it's only once a week or every other week, where in baseball they would never draw even 20,000 a game in the 40th largest market versus the 6th largest market.
You talking about Vegas? Morris? Vegas?
Yeah. Yes. Pardon?
Are you referring to Las Vegas, the 40th largest market?
Yes, I'm referring to Las Vegas, which is a threat of the real estate broker who has land in Las Vegas. Why would he want to go where football is only every other game, roughly 10 games, including exhibition, which would work? You could fly people from San Jose, LA, San Francisco, Oakland, once every other week to watch a football game, but 41 home games in Las Vegas and the 40th largest market versus the 6th largest market. Why?
Well, they would move from Oakland because they can't get a stadium together. And then why Vegas? I think Vegas, I haven't studied the issue that hard. Whoa, what is that? But Vegas has done well, not only with the Raiders, but with the hockey team there. I think the hockey team has drawn well. So there is a question of, could a baseball team succeed here with a new stadium with all the bells and whistles, the luxury suites and the restaurants around the ballpark? Would there be a way for them to make real money there? And I mean, it's a fair question you're asking. I can't answer it with full knowledge.
Thanks, Mars. John, and then Harvey.
I just put my question in the chat. Didn't think you'd get to me, but thanks, Ken. With the new committees that are just added, do you think it's good news for two names that have been brought up in this group, Horace Stoneham and Lefty O'Doul, and people like Don Mattingly, Keith Hernandez, Dale Murphy, even way back to Bud Fowler?
Well, it's definitely good news for the more recent guys you mentioned, Mattingly and Hernandez and Dale Murphy. The structure they have now is the committees covering the more recent times meet more frequently than the olden day. I think this, the committee that just elected Hodges, Minoso, Cott, and Oliva, I think it doesn't meet again, I think for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think the same goes for Fowler and O'Neill committee. They're really, there's obvious, there's more knowledge about the more recent years. Plus, let's be realistic, they are a business. Those people are more likely to be alive and more likely to be well known by fans, and therefore generate more revenue that way.
Thanks, John. Last one, Harvey, you're up.
Ken, the New York Times famously will not let its baseball writers, sports writers, vote for the Hall of Fame. Forget what my opinion is to a high-handed approach like that. Have you spoken to any writers, without mentioning any names? I don't want to put you on the spot. Have you spoken to any writers for the New York Times who've objected or who have expressed their dismay at not being able to vote?
Yes, I have, Harvey.
Okay. And they would want to vote.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Ken, I'm going to wrap this up. One quick question for you. You speaking about marriages today. SNN and the Post. Do you envision being on their whatever it is they're going to be doing?
SNN? You mean SNY?
SNY, I'm sorry.
Oh, is that out there?
Yes.
Oh, I had heard about that last week.
I think they made some kind of announcement yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, I think we're going to share some content. I think we're going to have some of their people on our website, and maybe some of our people on the TV. But to be honest, I'm not too sure. We have not received any official announcement. I just kind of heard through the grapevine about it. I didn't realize it was out there at all.
Listen, we cannot thank you enough for coming aboard tonight. Everybody in the audience, great way to support Ken is doing those clicks, buying the Post, going online. Ken, we can't thank you enough. Give Ken a nice round of applause.
Thank you, Ken, very much.
Ken,
Terrific.
don't be a stranger here.